Srimad Bhagwat Gita has 700 verses. If we read 100 verses per day, we will be able to complete the complete Bhagwat Gita in 1 week. So let's start for Tuesday. When your intellect, confused by hearing conflicting statements, will rest steady and distracted in meditation on God, you will then attain yoga, everlasting union with God. We have read till here in Monday session. Now we will start from here. Arjun said, Krishna, what is the definition, mark of a God realized soul, stable of mind and established in samadhi, that is, perfect tranquility of mind? How does the man of stable mind speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? Shri Bhagwan said, Arjun, when one thoroughly casts off all cravings of the mind and is satisfied in the self through the joy of the self, he is then called stable of mind. The sage whose mind remains unperturbed amid sorrows, whose thirst for pleasures has altogether disappeared, and who is free from passion, fear, and anger, is called stable of mind. He who is unattached to everything and meeting with good and evil, neither rejoices nor recoils, his mind is stable. When, like a tortoise that draws in its limbs from all directions, he withdraws all his senses from the sense objects, his mind becomes steady. Sense objects turn away from him who does not enjoy them with his senses, but the taste for them persists. This relish also disappears in the case of the man of stable mind when he realizes the supreme. Turbulent by nature, the senses, not free from attachment, even of a wise man who is practicing self control, forcibly carry away his mind. Arjuna. Therefore, having controlled all the senses and concentrating his mind, he should sit for meditation, devoting himself, heart and soul to me. For he whose senses are under his control is known to have a stable mind. The man dwelling on sense objects develops attachment for them. From attachment springs up desire, and from desire, unfulfilled, ensues anger. From anger arises delusion. From delusion, confusion of memory. From confusion of memory, loss of reason. And from loss of reason, one goes to complete ruin. But the self-controlled sadhak, while enjoying the various sense objects through his senses, which are disciplined and free from likes and dislikes, attains placidity of mind. With the attainment of such placidity of mind, all his sorrows come to an end, and the intellect of such a person of tranquil mind, soon withdrawing itself from all sides, becomes firmly established in God. He who has not controlled his mind and senses can have no determinate intellect, nor contemplation. Without contemplation, he can have no peace. And how can there be happiness for one lacking peace of mind? As the wind carries away a boat upon the waters, even so even so of the senses moving among sense objects, the one to which the mind is attached takes away his discrimination. Therefore, Arjun, he whose senses are completely restrained from their objects is said to have a stable mind. That which is night to all beings in that state of divine knowledge and supreme bliss, the God realized yogi keeps awake, and that the ever changing transient worldly happiness in which all beings keep awake is night to the seer. As the waters of different rivers enters the ocean, which, though full on all sides, remains undisturbed, likewise, he in whom all enjoyments merge themselves without causing disturbance attains peace, nor he who hankers after such enjoyments. He who has given up all desires and moves free from attachment, egoism, and thirst for enjoyment attains peace. Arjun, such is the state of the God realized soul, Having reached this state, he overcomes delusion, and established in this state, even at the last moment, he attains Brahmic bliss. Thus, in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahma, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjun ends the second chapter entitled Sankhya Yoga, the Yoga of Knowledge. Chapter 3. Arjun said, Krishna, if you consider knowledge as superior to action, why then do you urge me to do this dreadful action? Keshav, you are, as it were, puzzling my mind by these seemingly conflicting expressions. Therefore, tell me the one definite discipline by which I may obtain the highest good. Shri Bhagwan said, Arjun, in this world, two courses of sadhana, spiritual discipline, have been enunciated by me in the past. In the case of the Sankhya Yogi, the sadhana proceeds along the path of knowledge, whereas in case of the Karma Yogi, it proceeds along the path of action. Man does not attain freedom from action, culmination of the discipline of action, without entering upon action, nor does he reach perfection, culmination of the discipline of knowledge, merely by ceasing to act. Surely none can ever remain inactive, even for a moment, for everyone is helplessly driven to action by modes of Prakriti. He who outwardly, restraining the organs of senses and action, sits mentally dwelling on the objects of senses, that man of deluded intellect is called a hypocrite. On the other hand, he who, controlling the organs of senses and action by the power of his will and remaining unattached, undertakes the yoke of selfless action through those organs. Arjun, he excels. Sorry. Therefore, do you perform your allotted duty, for action is superior to inaction. Desisting from action, you cannot even maintain your body. Man is bound by his own action except when it is performed for the sake of sacrifice. Therefore, Arjun, do you efficiently perform your duty free from attachment for the sake of sacrifice alone? Having created mankind along with the spirit of sacrifice at the beginning of creation, the Creator Brahma said to them, you shall prosper by this, may this yield the enjoyments you see. Foster the gods through this sacrifice and let the gods be gracious to you. Thus, each fostering the other selflessly, you will attain the highest good. Fostered by sacrifice, the gods will surely bestow on you, unasked, all the desired enjoyments. He who enjoys the gifts bestowed by them without offering anything to them in return is undoubtedly a thief. The virtuous who partake of what is left over after sacrifice are absolved of all sins. Those sinful ones who cook for the sake of nourishing their bodies alone partake of sin only. All beings are evolved from food. Production of food is dependent on rain. Ensues from sacrifice, and sacrifice is rooted in prescribed action. Know that prescribed action has its origin in the Vedas, and the Vedas proceed from the indestructible God. Hence, the all pervading infinite is always present in sacrifice. Arjun, he who does not follow the wheel of creation, thus set going in the world, that is, does not perform his duties, leads a sinful and sensual life, he lives in vain. He, however, who takes delight in the self alone, and is gratified with the self, and is contented in the self, has no duty. In this world, that great soul has nothing to gain by action, nor by abstaining from action, nor has he selfish dependence of any kind on any creature. Therefore, go on efficiently doing your duty at all times without attachment. Doing work without attachment, men attains the supreme. It is through action without attachment alone that Janak and other wise men reached perfection, having in view the maintenance of the world order too. You should take to action. For whatever a great man does, that very thing other men also do. Whatever standard he sets up, The generality of men follow the same. Arjun, there is no duty in all the three worlds for me to perform, nor is there anything worth attaining unattained by me. Yet I continue to work. Should I not engage in action scrupulously at any time, great harm will come to the world. For Arjun, men follow my way in all matters. If I ever cease to act, these worlds would perish. Nay, I should prove to be the cause of confusion and of the destruction of these people. Arjun, as the unwise act without attachment, so should the wise men, with a view to maintain the world order, act without attachment. A wise man established in the self should not unsettle the mind of the ignorant attached to action, but should get them to perform all their duties, duly performing his own duties. In fact, all actions are being performed by the modes of Prakriti, primordial matter. The fool whose mind is deluded by egoism thinks, I am the doer. However, he who has true insight into the respective spheres of gunas, modes of Prakriti, and their actions, holding that it is the gunas in the shape of the senses, mind, etc., that move among the gunas, objects of perception, does not get attached to them, Arjun. Those who are completely deluded by the gunas, modes of Prakriti, remain attached to those gunas and actions. The men of perfect knowledge should not unsettle the mind of those ignorant of imperfect knowledge. Therefore, dedicating all actions to me, with your mind fixed on me, the self of all, freed from desire and the feeling of meum, and cured of mental agitation, fight. Even those men who, with an uncavailing and devout mind, always follow this teaching of mine, are released from the bondage of all actions. But they, however, who finding fault with this teaching of mine, do not follow it, take those fools to be deluded in the matter of all knowledge as lost. All living creatures follow their tendencies. Even the wise man acts according to their tendencies of his own nature. Of what use is any external restraint? Attraction and repulsion are rooted in all sense objects. Man should never allow himself to be swayed by them, because they are two principal enemies standing in the way of his redemption. One's own duty, though devoid of merit, is preferable to the duty of another, well performed. Even death in the performance of one's own duty brings blessedness. Another's duty is fraught with fear. Arjun said, now impelled by what, Krishna? Does this man commit sin even involuntarily as though driven by force? Sri Bhagwan said, it is desire begotten of the element of rajas, which appears as wrath. Nay, it is insatiable, and grossly wicked. Know this to be the enemy in this case. As fire is covered by smoke, mirror by dust, and embryo by the amnion, so is knowledge covered by desire. And Arjun, knowledge stands covered by this eternal enemy of the wise, known as desire, which is insatiable like fire. The senses, the mind, and the intellect are declared to be its seat. Covering the knowledge through these, it deludes the embodied soul. Therefore, Arjun, you must first control your senses and then kill this evil thing which obstructs Gyan, knowledge of the absolute or Nirgun Brahma, and Vigyan, knowledge of the Sakar Brahma or manifest divinity. The senses are said to be greater than the body, but greater than the senses is the mind, and greater than the mind is the intellect, and what is greater than the intellect is he, the self. Thus, Arjun, knowing the self which is higher than the intellect and subduing the mind by reason, kill this enemy in the form of desire that is hard to overcome. Thus, in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahma, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Shri Krishna and Arjun, ends the third chapter entitled Karma Yoga or the Yoga of Action. Chapter 4. Shri Bhagwan said, I revealed this immortal yoga to Vivaswan, that is sun god. Vivaswan conveyed it to Manu, his son, and Manu imparted it to his son Ishvaka. Thus transmitted in succession from father to son, Arjun, this yoga remained known to the Rajrishis, royal sages, through long lapse of the time. This yoga got lost to the world. The same ancient yoga, which is the supreme secret, has this day been imparted to you by me because you are my devotee and friend. Arjun said, "You are of recent origin, while the birth of Viswaswan dates back to remote antiquity. How then am I to believe that you imparted this yoga at the beginning of the creation?" Shri Bhagwan said, "Arjun, you and I have passed through many births. I remember them all. You do not remember, O chastier of foes. Though birthless and immortal and the Lord of all beings, I manifest myself through my own Yog Maya, divine potency, keeping my nature, Prakriti, under control. Arjun, whenever righteousness is on the decline, unrighteousness is in the ascendant, then I body myself forth. For the protection of the virtuous, for the extirpation of evildoers, and for establishing dharma, righteousness, on a firm footing, I manifest myself from age to age. Arjun, my birth and activities are divine. He who knows this in reality is not reborn on leaving his body, but comes to me. Completely rid of attachment, fear, and anger, wholly absorbed in me, depending on me, and purified by the finesse of wisdom, many have become one with me, even in the past. Arjun, howsoever men seek me, even so do I respond to them, for all men follow my path in every way. In this world of human beings, men seeking the fruition of their activities worship the gods, for success born of action follows quickly. The four orders of society, which is the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and the Sudra, were created by me, classifying them according to the gunas predominant in each and apportioning corresponding duties to them, appointing corresponding duties to them. Though the originator of this creation, know me, the immortal Lord, to be a non-doer. Since I have no craving for the fruit of actions, actions do not taint me. Even he who thus knows me in reality is not bound by actions. Having known thus, action was performed even by the ancient seekers for liberation. Therefore, do you also perform actions as have been performed by the ancients from antiquity. What is action and what is inaction? Even men of intelligence are puzzled over this question. Therefore, I shall expound to you the truth about action, knowing which you will be freed from its evil effects, that is, the shackles of karmas. The truth about action must be known, and the truth of inaction must also be known. Even so, the truth about prohibited action, vikarma, must be known, for mysterious are the ways of action. He who sees in action, and action in inaction is wise among men. He is a yogi who has performed all actions. Even the wise call him a sage, whose undertakings are all free from the desire and sankalpa, thoughts of the world, and whose actions are burnt up by the fire of wisdom. He who, having totally given up attachment to actions and their fruits, no longer depends on anything in the world, and is even content, does nothing at all, though fully engaged in action. Having subdued his mind and body, and giving up all objects of enjoyment, and free from craving, he who performs sheer bodily action does not incur sin. The Karam Yogi who is contented with whatever is got unsought is free from jealousy and has transcended all pairs of opposites like joy and grief and is balanced in success and failure, is not bound by his action. All his actions get dissolved entirely, who is free from attachment and has no identification with the body and free from the feeling of mind, whose mind is established in the knowledge of self and who works merely for the sake of sacrifice. In the practice of seeing Brahma everywhere as a form of sacrifice, Brahma is the ladle with which oblation is poured into the fire, etc. Brahma again is the oblation, Brahma is the fire, Brahma itself is the sacrificer, and so Brahma itself constitutes the act of pouring the oblation into the fire. And finally, Brahma is the goal to be reached by him who is absorbed in Brahma is the act of such sacrifice. Other yogis duly offer sacrifice only in the shape of worship to gods, while others perform sacrifice by offering the self by the self itself in the fire of Brahma through the sacrifice known as the perception of identity. Others offer as sacrifice their senses of hearings, etc., into the fires of self discipline. Other yogis again offer sound and other objects of perception into the fire of the senses. Others sacrifice all the function of their senses and the functions of their vital airs, pran, into the fire of yoga in the shape of self control, kindled by wisdom. Some perform sacrifice with material possessions, some other sacrifice in the shape of austerities, others sacrifice through the practice of yoga, while some striving souls, observing austere vows, perform sacrifice in the shame of wisdom through the study of sacred texts. Other yogis offer the act of exhalation into that of inhalation. Even so, others, the act of inhalation into that of exhalation. There are still others given to the practice of pranayam, breath control, who, having regulated their diet and controlled the process of exhalation and inhalation, with both pour their vital airs into the vital airs themselves. All these have their sins consumed away by sacrifice and understand the meaning of sacrificial worship. Arjun, yogis who enjoy the nectar that has been left over after the performance of a sacrifice attain the eternal Brahma. To the man who does not offer sacrifice, even this world is not happy. How then can the other world be happy? Many such forms of sacrifice have been set forth in detail in the Vedas. Know them all as involving the action of mind, senses, and body. Thus, knowing the truth about them, you shall be freed from the bondage of action, though through their performance. Arjun, sacrifice through knowledge is superior to sacrifice performed with material things. For all actions, without exception, culminate in knowledge, O son of Kunti. Understand the true nature of that knowledge by approaching illumined soul. If you prostrate at their feet, render them service, and question them with an open and guileless heart, those wise seers of truth will instruct you in that knowledge. Arjun, when you have achieved enlightenment, ignorance will delude you no more. In the light of that knowledge, you will see the entire creation first within your own self and then in me, the Oversoul. Even if you were the most sinful of all the sinners, this knowledge alone would carry you like a raft across all your sins. For as the blazing fire turns the fuel to ashes, Arjun, even so the fire of knowledge turns all actions to ashes. In this world, there is no purifier as great as knowledge. He who has attained purity of heart through prolonged practice of Karma Yoga automatically sees the light of truth in the self in course of time. So we completed 200 verses of Bhagavad Gita, which has 700 verses.